GCSE warfare through time, short revision clips. We're in the early modern period, 1500 to 1700, and we are considering the impact of warfare on civilians. For much of the period 1500 to round about the mid part of the 17th century, 1640 let's say, civilians experienced warfare in practically the same way as they had done in previous centuries during the Middle Ages. So you could be recruited into the army, there was forced requisitioning of supplies, taxes might increase, wars would bring rising prices because of shortages, so you would get inflation. And geographically too, so if you were on the border with Scotland, you might be impacted more by war than inland areas, similar with coastal towns as well, being vulnerable to attack from nations like France and Spain. But it is the 1640s and the English Civil War that brings a new intensity and scale to the impact on civilians. You know, during this period, after looking at recruitment, that you get conscription, so many men were pressed to serve against their will. Lots of men were conscripted into the army. Armies on both sides would requisition supplies, would take items like food from villages. They would be expected to have free accommodation, which is something known as billeting. Soldiers weren't always well behaved. There was looting of people's goods and property, again on both sides. Some soldiers sought plunder as a way of a reward for their participation in the army, or as a means of revenge against the other side. Clearly, governments needed to spend a lot of money, so taxation was increased and became an additional burden. And the war itself was incredibly damaging for the people of England and Scotland and Wales during this period. You had about 150 towns suffering major attacks or getting besieged during the English Civil War, and conditions in sieges would sometimes be awful, with disease and plague spreading. Estimates for soldier and civilian casualties during the English Civil War, including not just fighting but disease, was about 180,000 people, which is over 3.5% of the population, which was a bigger proportion than that of the First World War of 1914 to 1918. So overall then, very quickly, lots of continuity, little change in the civilian experience of warfare until you get to that big turning point, the English Civil War of the 1640s, and this brutal contest caused immense suffering, was on a scale and intensity that had never been seen before in the country.